Today's reading is from John chapter 11, verses 17 to 44. This is a reading from one of the biographies of Jesus, the Gospel of John, and it describes an incident where Jesus responded to the news that a friend of his called Lazarus had fallen ill and died. Jesus has made his way to the scene, and we pick up the story with Jesus arriving and meeting the grieving family. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth round his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go."
Well, good morning to you. My name's Orlando. Let me repeat the welcome that Pete's already given to you today. It's lovely to have us all here and to spend a little bit of time reflecting on something that's really going on, that's been going on in the hearts of those that we're going to see getting wet a little bit later on. The future is not what it used to be. Heard that one before? It's an old wit who said it. Funny way of making the point, but you get the gist of it. Things are not exactly looking rosy just at the moment, are they? I wonder what you think. Do you think they look rosy or not? How does the future look generally to you at this point in time? Are you the sort that tends to be given to despair about the way things are heading? Or are you, maybe you've got a bit of hope in the future somewhere along the path? Does contemplating what lies ahead fill you with gloom? Or are you, despite everything, a bit more optimistic? I suppose it's just another way of asking the old glass half empty, glass half full question, but I'm talking about general long-term outlook. Is everything going pear-shaped, or are we basically going to muddle through somehow? Despair or hope? I imagine that for most of us, if we're really honest, it's actually a bit of both. Isn't that right? Well, we live in Charles Dickens' land. You remember A Tale of Two Cities? It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It's kind of both and. I mean, yes, there are so many reasons at the moment for despair, aren't there? Will the bullets and the bombs and the tanks never end? Is the economic outlook ever going to improve? Is there going to be anything left of our planet for our grandchildren? How many more school shootings are we going to have to read about in the papers? And yet here's the thing about us. We still get out of bed every morning. We still start out on new courses, new careers. We still start out on new relationships. We bring new children into the world. The sun still shines. I was talking to someone this week. Turned out he was a long-time supporter of Ipswich Town Football Club. I mean, talking about putting hope over experience. Seriously, though, we are, yes, caught up in the middle a bit. But I do think the signs are that most of us, despite everything that's happening, still have our gloom and despair outbalanced, outweighed by our hopes and our dreams. More close run for some than others, I grant you, but that does seem to be the general consensus. That fair? There is just one problem, of course, one spanner in the works, and to be fair, it is a big one. It's the problem of death. And the way death seems to get in the way of any real hope. We just think of those little primary school children in Texas this week, just starting life, starting friendships, starting education. And out of the blue, a bullet from an assault rifle ends it all. Is it awful? Most of us here are a little bit further down the line than those kids, but it's not so much different for the rest of us, is it? Death is all around us, fills our news feeds. For some, perhaps even in this room, it fills our family WhatsApp feeds. It seems to laugh at us, to scoff at us, to ridicule our plans for what we're going to do with our lives. What do we do with death? Actually, that is a question worth reflecting on. What do you do with death? There's a few common responses, I suppose, different postures you could take. One would be the old turned head. That is, you just try to look away from death. Nothing to see here. Move along. That's where you fill your life with work and relationships and activities and screens and leisure and trips and so on, and desperately try to avoid any big issues like life and death. Not so easy since COVID, though, is it? Day after day of those big charts and statistics and graphs and person after person after person who's lost a friend or a relative. Just looking away has got harder. Or there's the shrugged shoulders, I suppose you could put it. That is, you just minimize death. You trivialize it. The great thinker from last century, Bertrand Russell, famously said, "When I die, I shall rot." Well, he was wrong on at least one count there, actually. Apart from anything else, he was actually cremated, as it turned out. Sorry, Bertrand. But you see his point. You see what he's saying? He's saying death is just a natural thing. It's part of the cycle of life. Live, die, rot. It's how nature works. Edvard Munch, the artist, said, "From my rotting body, flowers shall grow, and I am in them, and that is eternity." It's just natural. The problem there is it just doesn't feel natural, does it? Death feels wrong. Feels like something you should not just accept. So that view of death, trivializing it like that, actually seems to fail the basic livability test. And nobody really lives as though death was just a nothing. And then I suppose there's inevitably the clenched fist posture. I'm talking about those who respond to the reality of death by, well, effectively taking death on, or trying to. Come on, death, you and me. Let's see what you got. They throw themselves into health and fitness, down at the gym every morning. Diet is full of superfoods and vitamins and what have you. Morning routine full of rejuvenating face creams. Push death back. Or else take it up a gear and take the Jeff Bezos approach. Buy yourself a cryogenics company. Get yourself frozen at some point. Invest a fortune in the technology necessary to unfreeze you at some point in the future. And talking about clenching your fist at death, taking it on. But let's be real for a second. This is not a fight you can really win, is it? First funeral I ever took, it was for a healthy young man, 22 maybe. He was on a football scholarship at college overseas, fittest of the fit, and death took him just like that, out of the blue, no warning, right there, collapsed actually on the football pitch. This is not a fair fight. It's not one you can win. So there's the question. Given the inevitability of death, can there really be any hope? Well, here's the thing. If Jesus is to be believed, then maybe hope is possible. Have a think about that incident in the life of Jesus that was just read to us a moment ago. So it's the passage on your sheet there, if you were lucky enough to, or arrived early enough to get a sheet. Have a look at it again. It should be there in front of you. And again, it's an extract from a biography of Jesus written by one of his closest friends. And here we find at the beginning Jesus arriving at effectively a funeral scene, been going on sentence 17 there for 4 days. But you look at 19, the place is packed. Many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them. Well, one of them, the sisters, Martha, she comes and greets Jesus. She has the sense, apparently, that somehow in the presence of Jesus, death would not have had free rein here. If you'd been here, my brother would not have died. And they had this little exchange about the future, the idea that was popular at the time, that at the end of time, people will rise from the dead. And it's at this point that Jesus comes out with this extraordinary statement. It's the one in bold there on your sheet. And I want to spend a bit of time thinking about this one. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Now, there's a lot going on in that fairly brief statement, so I wonder if it might be worth just breaking it down a bit into some pieces and see what he's getting at. Does that sound like worth a go? Well, have a look at the first one there. What's Jesus saying? A number of things, among them, that death is real. Death is real. The clue's there in the middle of the statement. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. Do you see that? Jesus is quite prepared to accept the reality of death. And in fact, to engage with that reality. where most of us just run a mile from it if we're really honest, especially perhaps people of the kind of age that most of us in this room are. People die, he's saying. They do. Let's be real about that. Death is a thing. Let's not pretend it's a nothing. Let's not try to avoid the subject. It's real, and in fact, it is just awful. Look at sentence 33. When Jesus saw Mary weeping and the Jews who'd come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." There are tears in the eyes of Lazarus' sister, tears in the eyes of all the visitors there that day, and now tears in the eyes of Jesus himself. Everyone there can see how cut up Jesus was. This is no calm, head in the clouds, Buddha-like detachment from the reality of pain and suffering and death. It's no inhuman dismissal of death as just part of the cycle of life. No, Jesus sobs. If you or I are ever in a situation that we find ourselves wondering in the face of this pain of ours, whether God even cares about it all, then just look at this scene. Here is the one who claimed to be God in human flesh, and he's bawling his eyes out. God cares. Be sure of that. Death is real, you see, and it is awful. But there's more to be said. Back to that bolded statement there. Yes, death is real, but second thing, new life is possible. New life is possible. Middle of the statement. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. If you subscribe to one of those streaming services on your TV, you won't have missed that there's been a real fascination out there with the afterlife. Netflix had Ricky Stern's Surviving Death and Tyler Henry's Life After Death, and of course the real biggie, The Good Place. Amazon Prime had Upload and Forever. TBS managed somehow to squeeze a rom-com out of the premise with Miracle Workers. And on it goes. We're fascinated, aren't we? We all want to know, is there anything beyond the brick wall of death? Is it just a nice fairy tale to cling on to, the idea of an afterlife, there to make us feel better? Or is life beyond death actually a possibility? Well, Jesus says yes. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. Which, let's face it, I suppose could just sit in the that's a nice thought category. Yes, something to get you through the tough times and that sort of thing. Nothing more than that. It could be that. Were it not for what Jesus himself now does. Look down again, sentence 38. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. And then down to 41, they took away the stone. And Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you've heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you've sent me." When he'd said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth round his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Lazarus has been dead for days, but now in the presence of Jesus, the one who claims to be the resurrection and the life, he's risen from the dead. It's a dramatic, very dramatic, physical demonstration of that principle that Jesus had laid out. That with him in the picture, because of who he is, the resurrection and the life, new life is possible. Even where death has been at work. Death is real, but new life is possible. And then, again, back to the bold statement, if you wouldn't mind, a fresh start is available. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you spot something a bit strange in that statement? It's a little bit odd, isn't it? One moment he's saying death is real, even though they die, he says. But then next sentence he says, well, it's off the agenda, isn't it? They will never die. Which is it? To answer that, you need to get what Jesus really means by life. When Jesus talks about life, the thing that really defines life for him is not actually whether your heart's beating or whether you've got brainstem activity or whatever it is the medics talk about when they talk about life. No, life in his book, real life, the life that's really worth living, is being in relationship with God, being friends with God. That's what Jesus means by life. And so when he talks of living and never dying, he's really saying you can get into a living, breathing friendship with God right here and now, and nothing will ever affect that relationship. Real life, life in relationship with God can be yours and yours for good, and nothing, not even physical death, will affect that. A fresh start with God is available, and it's available now for anyone who allies themselves to Jesus. In a few minutes, we're going to see 6 people allying themselves to Jesus in an extraordinarily dramatic way. We're going to see them die and rise again. Not physically, it's okay, relax, no baptism candidates will be harmed in the production of this drama, but symbolically. Because what Jesus did with Lazarus, showing himself to be what he claimed to be, the resurrection and the life, raising him from death to life, he later did in himself. As Jesus himself died the death you and I deserve to die for all our wrongdoing, our rejection of him, and then rose again. And on the basis of that, he offers to do the same to anybody who comes in faith to him, bringing them new life, life forever in friendship with God, the kind of life that not even death can take away. And actually, in case you're wondering, he could even do that for you. If you decide to entrust your future to him, that could be your story. Are you ready for a fresh start like that? For Jem, it was singing that song, wasn't it? You Alone Can Rescue, that led to her fresh start. For Marcus, it was reading that book, the Gospel of Luke. For Jessie, it was just being reminded of the building blocks of the faith that she'd been taught for years. For Dan, it was a challenging conversation, among other things. For Michael, it was times in his Connect group that helped him own the start he'd already made. For Josh, it took a real decline in mental health and academic career to bring him to his fresh start. What might it be for you? I wonder if one day you might be in one of those videos saying, it was coming to church for a baptism service on the 29th of May 2022 that turned your life around and gave you the fresh start. But whatever it looks like, whatever the circumstances, in the end it will be the same thing. It will be simply coming to Jesus and saying to him in one way or another, you are the resurrection and the life. I believe that. And despite all that I am and all that I've been, I want to make a fresh start with you now and begin a new forever friendship with God right here. Is that a fresh start you want to make? I'm going to invite us to have a moment of quiet. And then in just a moment's time, I'm going to lead us in a prayer that's going to come up on the screen. And you're very welcome to join with me in that prayer if you think it's right for you. Some quiet then to reflect. And in the quietness of your own mind and heart, do join me if you wish to. Lord Jesus, I deserve nothing good from you. But you claimed to take away the death I deserve and bring a new forever life. And I believe you. Please give me that fresh start now. And help me to live a life of trusting and following you forever.